Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of Adorned with Dignity. Today we're on day 29 and we're talking about maintaining tznuis. Today's chapter is going to focus more on the actual dressing modestly as opposed to the mitzvah kisurosh. So we're going to get into it. And it says, although this book expounds upon the beauty of our crown of splendor, we must remember not to compromise on other areas of tznuis to maintain all aspects of this noble mitzvah. Thus, we will review some of the basic guidelines of tznuis and dress. And indeed, through our conducting ourselves modestly in dress, speech, and behavior, we can come closer to Hashem and reconnect to our essence. So I want you to focus really on that last sentence, because tzniut is not just about the way you're dressing or the way you're covering your hair. It also has to do with the way you're behaving, which I think sometimes, we think, I'm all covered and I can behave wherever I want. I can, make a lot of jokes in front of guys and be, listen, I'm a funny person. Not to pat myself on the back, I'm a very funny person. But even I have to be careful in all these areas. Tznuis is something that everybody has to work on. We have to be on guard all the time, because this is the area we have our Yetzirah. And speaking of Yetzirah, I want to bring to your attention, this was a study that actually had nothing to do with tznuis per se, but when I heard it years ago, I remembered it and I said, this is exactly what's going on, not only in all mitzvahs, but especially in tznuis. And if you're watching along on a video stream such as YouTube, I'm going to be posting pictures of exactly what I'm talking about. And I posted this maybe about a year ago on a WhatsApp chat, and I really kind of went through the history of fashion to point out this experiment that I'm about to tell you. So the experiment is that they took a pot, a cauldron, if you will, and they put water into it and they placed a frog into it. And, they did two experiments. One where they turned the heat up right away, and every time the frog would jump out immediately, right? As soon as he saw the temperature change, he would jump out. On the other experiment, they put the frog in, but they turned the temperature up ever so slightly, to the point where really the frog had become accustomed to every level they turned it up, and therefore he never jumped out and he died. So now this is exactly what's going on in tznuis, right? If you were to take, I'm just going to go back even, 80 years ago, and you were to take those fashions of that day, which were already starting to come into this area of compromise, but from that point, if you would take it from there and show those women today's fashions, it would be like the first experiment. They would revolt. They would say, no way. This is disgusting. They'd be revolting. There'd be women in uproar everywhere. But because fashion kind of changed ever so slightly, little by little, we all became accustomed to this half-naked look. And we saw that, and we thought this was like so great. But this is the same thing that happened to the second frog, where when they turn the temperature up ever so slightly, we don't move because we become accustomed to it, and we just grow like this is the new normal, and we stay there. But as a result, it is to our detriment, and has v'shalom, we will end up dying as a result of this. This is a very, very subtle thing that's happening, and it's creeped in over the years, and you can see that in the fashion alone. And with that comes the clear correlation that every generation this has happened with, more boundaries start getting pushed in other areas, and therefore the level of our generations have gone down, not just for Yidden, but also for the Goyim. So now, if you're listening on like a stream and you want to see what I'm talking about, you can watch it on one of the video streams. You can go to YouTube on Gimel Dalet 777. That's GIMEL DALET 777, and you can kind of see the video playback of the history of fashion. And I'm going to try to cap it up until a certain point, because everybody knows what's going on in today's day and age. It's half naked, and you kind of want to tell people, did you forget your shirt or did you forget your pants? And at least for the goyim, you say pants, but did you forget your skirt? Did you forget anything? Did you forget your bottoms? So we're going to get back into today's lesson. It says skirts, the length of skirts, and so the hip, thigh, knee area must be covered, and it's shaped completely camouflaged. Therefore, Skirts must be long enough to cover the shape of the knees at all time, even if thick socks are worn. So this is another trend. Girls try to like put the skirt right to the knees, and they figure, well, I'm wearing these opaque socks, it must be okay. No. The knee should never be showing at any time. At any time, it should never be showing, especially when you're sitting. So even if the skirt is covering you at your knees while you're standing and you go to sit and it goes up, it's not okay. If you're starting out and you have a skirt and it's kind of like it's dicey, you don't know. The best test I used to do for myself was I get a pair of knee highs. If I could see the bottom of the band, already I knew that was a problem. And so it's not good. So it goes on, it says, a skirt that just covers the knees is unacceptable, since as a result of slight move, the knees will become exposed. Moreover, it doesn't look refined when a large portion of the lower leg are visible. And believe it or not, the more you are keeping in tznius, the more you see that last sentence. You do start to see it, but it's funny because, again, when you're like that frog who's in such hot water that you don't even realize how hot the water is, you just let it pass by and you don't see the big deal of it. But when you're like the first experiment, you automatically see it. And it's funny how your perspective just switches the more that you go into this behavior and this way of thinking. So it says, it's been carefully assessed that in order for a skirt to cover the knees in all situations, it needs to extend at least 4 inches past the lowest point of the kneecap. Additionally, depending on the style of the skirt and the height and weight of the person, more inches may be needed. Therefore, in order to ensure that a skirt is long enough, in accordance to halakha, a woman should make sure that it is at least 4 inches past the knees, and should also sit down in front of a mirror to check the knees that they are completely covered. So in today's fashion, the best way you want to think of, you want like an A-line skirt that kind of hits towards the calf. And this kind of covers you at all times. Now there's some kind of, I also posted, I may post it on YouTube. I'm not sure. I'm gonna try to post it again, but bli netter. But a trick that I use, I'm petite. I'm 5'3 3/4, and I'm almost 5'4, and so if you go into a tall size, if you find a dress that's tall, then you're already gaining at least 3 or 4 inches. Another trick that I learned is that if you have a skirt that's kind of, almost there, you can go to like a fabric store and either get somebody to do it professionally, if you don't know how to do it, and just add an extension. And you can this is really nice because you become your own designer, and you can kind of put like a border or anything, whether it's a solid border, if you want a border with a lace overlay, whatever it is, depending on what the style of the dress is, and you can kind of make an extension to that. So it's almost like it's almost there, it's close, but it's no cigar. And you add this additional layer of cloth on it, and it becomes a kosher style. And you can, and in this way you can get really creative. And again, if you don't know how to do it, go to a seamstress, have them do it. And you become your own designer, and you're going to be, before you know it, you're going to have such a beautiful wardrobe that's all in line with tznius. So there's a well-known concept about keeping fences, but even more so about going the extra mile. And Rabbi Avigdor Miller Shlita has taught us once before. It says that for every additional benefit, in other words, in every fence that you add on, Shem says, if you pay extra attention to my will, then I will pay extra attention to yours. And this is the thing that really warms Hashem's heart, when we go past that which is required of us, because you're making that extra effort. When you're doing just what you have to do, okay, you did what you have to do. But when you go extra, that's when you've hit the big time. So it says it is important to note that even if a skirt is of sufficient length and width in accordance to halakha, you should take care in the following situations. So one of the situations, going in and out of a car. The best way that I do it is when I'm opening my car, I kind of sit first and then swing my legs, as opposed to putting one leg in and having this gap. So you're just sitting and swinging your legs in. So when you're sitting in a staircase or a porch, A lot of things I like to do is I'll have one leg kind of cross over, not over the knee, but kind of over the shin over. And this kind of gives you very nice, elegant, refined look. Always sitting up straight. You should always have a good posture about you. Additionally, especially in the summer months when it's warmer, if you're riding a bike, if you're on one of those boats that you have, those pedal boats, you want to make sure that you're paying attention to all these areas. If you're going to a carnival and you're going on a ride, be very careful. You have to be very careful. Sometimes, we can be kosher in the way we're dressing. We can be tznius. We can be all perfectly good. But then we put ourselves in a situation, and because we're not even paying attention to it, this is where we get tripped up. So sometimes it's very difficult. Now, Hashem is really great because he always prepares you in life, in your early years, for what you need in your later years. And I was actually, in my family, it was a requirement that the women had to teach the younger generation etiquette. And part of that was, derek eretz. Mostly for women, it was really the way you're standing, the way you're sitting. So Baruch Hashem, a lot of these things have already been ingrained in. And I suggest that anyone who wants to start getting into this more refined, dignified presence about you should probably really consider into going into some kind of etiquette class, or to hire someone who can teach you about etiquette. And believe it or not, you'd be surprised. When you carry yourself in this dignified manner, people really do take notice, because this is something so rare in our generation. Because again, people are just out there and they're just flaunting everything, and anything that is rare, people gravitate to. This is the difference between like royalty and being famous. Famous people do whatever they have to be known, to be recognized, and it's really all about this kind of ego-driven identity. Where royal is not the same. Royal actually has to deal with a level of humility, because they understand that they are not for themselves. Everything they do is for the people and the betterment of their government, the betterment of their people. And this is really what Hashem is telling us to be, that in Klal Yisrael, we have to not only be refined in the way we are, we have to be an example not only to ourselves, to our family members, and to our communities, but then at that point we have to be a light into the nations. And in this you have to be different, and that's just the way it is. But that's the difference between royalty and being famous. And just to point out that if you ever look at anyone who not was like per se married into royalty, but born into royalty, you'll see that there is this difference, because this has been their life all the time. There is this refinement. They are not like everyone else. And I have to tell you, I remember, I think it was right before the former Sheikh of Iran, when he and his family were exiled out of Iran. They did a documentary on his wife, and his wife, till this day, she really has a very refined look of tznius about her. And she is a good example of like modern tznius. She has her skirts down to this, to really this kind of mid, calf level. But, even, again, there are things that we can do. There's today's styles. If we set the trends, people will follow that. And, it's always better to set the trends as opposed to following it. And Rabbi Messiah ben Harash says that it's better to be the tail of a lion than to be the head of a fox. So, really, it's better to be attached to something much more dignified as opposed to something that is very undignified and very sneaky. And, just don't follow the trends of the world. Follow what Hashem has given and put a pattern. And believe me when I tell you, people will react to this. Even if you think they're giving you a hard time, secretly they're giving you kavod, because they themselves want to do it. And you're becoming this mirror and reflecting what the behavior should be. And sometimes that causes a reaction out of people, and they tend to lash out. But I promise you that they really secretly are wishing to do the same mitzvah. So keep doing it, keep going. I encourage you to press forward. So tops and robes, it says tops and robes must have kosher necklines at the front, sides, and back, at the front of the collarbone, it must be covered. And in the back, the second bone of the spine must be covered. And a neck can be used to check, a necklace can be used to check if the sides of the neck are covered properly. And how is this done? It says place the necklace at the lowest natural point. The areas beyond the neckline on the sides and the back should be covered. So this is also a very big area where people trip up, and and this is where good things like shells and undershirts are very popular. Or you can, like, they have these little cheater shirts that kind of fill in all the gaps of like V-necks and things of this nature. You have to be careful also if you're raising your hand that your midriff doesn't show, that the shirt doesn't lift up to a point where it becomes, not tzniut. Your sleeves should be long enough to cover the elbows at all times. So even if when you're bending, you need to make sure that's covered. So I would say a 3/4 length shirt is probably your safest bet. You want to make sure, even when you're going with these dresses, right, and they have spaghetti string tops, don't just throw like a cardigan and yet your whole neckline is like exposed, okay? And in that case, I would say if you're looking at a dress like that, you might as well just go for the color skirts. So just get a skirt because, and thankfully in our generation, maxi skirts and these like middies, which are like kind of the A-line skirts that go over to the calf, are very much in style, And I have always been taught by my grandmother to go for a classic look. Because if you go with something that's trendy or has high patterns, then it's only good for that season. Whereas when you have very classic colors, classic looking things, they're kind of timeless, which is what really you should be, emulating, is this timeless look of tznius that everyone wants to emulate every year because it's always in fashion. So now we're moving on to stockings. It says stockings must be thick enough to cover the legs properly. And, your stockings should make it look like they're stockings. And it should not give the impression the legs are not covered. And she closes out with a passage, and it says, let us remember the famous cry of the Vilna Gaon before he was niftar, when his Talmidim asked him why he was crying, and he held on to his tzitzis and he exclaimed, I'm so sorry to leave this world. For a few cents, I can perform thousands of mitzvot every day. Imagine when we wear clothes of royalty, we will be gaining thousands of mitzvot every second of the day. And this is what's so great about the mitzvah of tznius, because it is literally every second of the day that you are, generating this mitzvah, which is bringing down a great light. But let's keep in perspective, the mitzvah of kisur rosh also falls into this, because we're talking about this whole concept of royalty. It would be like, without having the proper head covering, it almost seems like it would be like a crown on someone who is wearing like a very casual jeans and sneakers. It just doesn't go together. And vice versa. It's like if you were to see a royal person and their head was covered properly, but they're wearing jeans and sneakers, it just, the whole look of it, like you always expect royalty to kind of have it together. Even in their casual days, they always have it together. They have this essence of elegance about them. So this is really what we want to be striving for, a very elegant, classic look that really, I think, in this day and age, really, if you're looking for tznius, you can find it everywhere. You can find it in a very stylish manner. So that's really the goal that we want. So that's it for today, and I hope we'll all be together again soon. B'ezrat Hashem.